The year was 1876, and the autumn leaves were falling in Massachusetts just like Rebecca's whole world was crumbling around her. She was only 23 years old, but she felt like her life had already ended before it truly began. Rebecca had been gone for 3 years, living in New York City. When she returned home, she carried more than just her bags. She was 6 months pregnant, and there was no husband by her side. In those days, this was the worst thing that could happen to a young woman from a good family. Her father owned one of the biggest trading companies in Boston. They lived in a grand house on the hill where everyone could see it. The family name meant something in that town. It meant respect. It meant honor. But all of that was about to change. When Rebecca's mother saw her condition, the color drained from her face. Her father's reaction was even worse. He didn't yell at first. He just stared at her with cold, hard eyes that made her feel smaller than an ant. The silence in that big house was heavier than any words could have been. 2 days later, her father did something that broke Rebecca's heart into 1,000 pieces. He made her stand on the front steps of their estate, while neighbors and townspeople gathered around. In front of everyone, he told the crowd that Rebecca was no longer his daughter. He said she had brought shame to the family name and that she was dead to them. Rebecca stood there with tears streaming down her face while people she had known her entire life turned their backs on her. Women who used to smile and wave at her now pulled their children close and whispered behind their hands. Men who worked for her father looked away like she had become invisible. The man who had promised to marry her, the banker's son named Thomas, had already fled town weeks before. When Rebecca had written to tell him about the baby, he denied everything. He said she was lying. He said the child couldn't possibly be his. Then he packed his bags and headed west, leaving her alone to face the consequences of what they had done together. Rebecca tried to find help. She went to the church where she had been baptized, where she had attended services every Sunday since she was a little girl. The pastor, a man who had blessed her at her confirmation, refused to let her enter. He stood at the door and told her that sinners were not welcome in God's house until they had repented. But how could she repent for loving her child? How could she be sorry for the tiny life growing inside her? She tried to find work, but no one would hire her. The shops didn't want her. The factories turned her away. Even the taverns, places that weren't known for their moral standards, refused her service. It seemed like the whole world had decided she didn't deserve to exist anymore. Winter was coming fast. Rebecca could feel it in the cold wind that cut through her thin coat. She had nowhere to sleep, no money left, and a baby that would be born in just a few months. She sat on a bench near the harbor and watched the ships come and go, wondering if she should just walk into the cold water and end it all. That's when she remembered something. Her mother's brother, Uncle William, had died 2 years ago. He had been a trader who worked in the Arizona Territory, far out west where few people from Boston ever went. He had owned a small trading post out there in the desert. No one in the family wanted it. It was too far away, too dangerous, too worthless to them. But to Rebecca, it suddenly seemed like the only chance she had. Out there, no one would know her story. No one would know about her shame. She could start fresh, build a new life where the past couldn't reach her. It was a desperate plan, maybe even a foolish one, but it was the only plan she had. She used the last of her money to book passage on a stagecoach heading west. The ticket agent looked at her belly and raised his eyebrows, but he took her money without asking questions. That was the last bit of kindness she would receive for a long time. As the stagecoach pulled away from Boston, Rebecca looked back at the city one final time. She saw the church steeple rising above the buildings. She saw the hill where her family's house stood like a castle. She saw everything she had ever known disappearing behind her. She placed her hand on her belly and felt the baby move inside her. At least she wasn't completely alone. She had this child, this innocent life that didn't care about society's rules or about what people thought was proper. The baby just wanted to be born, to live, to have a chance. Rebecca whispered a promise to her unborn child. "I don't know what's waiting for us out there," she said softly so the other passengers wouldn't hear. "I don't know if we'll survive, but I promise you this, little one. I will fight for you. I will find a way to give you a life, even if the whole world says we don't deserve one." The stagecoach rolled on through the evening, carrying Rebecca away from everything she had ever known, and toward a future that was as uncertain as the darkening sky above. She had no idea that her real journey was just beginning. or that in the harsh desert of the Arizona Territory, she would find something she never expected. She would find a love stronger than any she had known. She would find a family that chose her instead of abandoning her, and she would discover that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are and what you're truly capable of becoming. But first, she had to survive the journey. She had to make it to that distant trading post, and she had to do it all while carrying new life inside her, with winter chasing her westward like a hungry wolf. The other passengers in the stagecoach kept their distance from her. They could see her condition and they knew what it meant. In those days, people believed they could catch shame like a disease, so they pressed themselves against the far side of the coach and avoided looking at her directly. Rebecca didn't mind. She had gotten used to being invisible. She had gotten used to being alone. What she hadn't gotten used to was the fear. Every night when the stagecoach stopped at a station, she wondered if she would find a place to sleep. Every morning when she woke up, she wondered if this would be the day her body gave up and the baby came too early. But something inside her, something stronger than fear and stronger than shame, kept pushing her forward. Maybe it was mother's instinct, that fierce love that appears even before the baby is born, or maybe it was just stubbornness, a refusal to let the world break her completely. Whatever it was, it carried her mile after mile toward the Arizona Territory, toward the unknown, toward a destiny that would change her life in ways she could never imagine. The journey westward felt like it would never end. Days blurred into weeks as the stagecoach carried Rebecca farther and farther from everything familiar. The landscape changed from green forests to flat prairies, then to dry, dusty plains that seemed to stretch on forever under an endless sky. By the time they reached Santa Fe, Rebecca's belly had grown even larger. She was now in her 8th month, and every bump in the road sent sharp pains through her back. The baby kicked constantly, as if protesting the uncomfortable journey just as much as she was. Santa Fe was unlike any place Rebecca had ever seen. Adobe buildings lined dusty streets, and she heard Spanish being spoken as much as English. The air smelled of chili peppers and wood smoke. It should have been exotic and exciting, but Rebecca was too tired and worried to appreciate any of it. She needed a place to stay for the night before continuing her journey. The first boarding house she tried took one look at her and said they had no rooms available. Rebecca could see through the window that at least 3 rooms were empty, but the owner just shook her head firmly and closed the door. The second place was the same. The woman who answered didn't even let Rebecca finish asking. "We don't rent to your kind," she said bluntly. And that was that. Rebecca wanted to cry, but she was too exhausted even for tears. She had spent all day on a cramped stagecoach. Her back was screaming in pain, and now she couldn't even find a bed to sleep in. She wondered if this was how it would be for the rest of her life, always being turned away, always being judged. Finally, she found a run-down inn on the edge of town. The building leaned slightly to one side, and the paint was peeling off the walls. But when Rebecca knocked, the old man who answered actually looked at her with something like kindness in his eyes. "I can pay," Rebecca said quickly, showing him her small purse of coins. "I just need a room for one night." The old man studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Room 3 upstairs. Breakfast isn't included, but there's a well out back for washing." Rebecca almost hugged him. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. It was something. That night, lying on a lumpy mattress in a room that smelled of dust and old tobacco, Rebecca asked the old man about her uncle's trading post. His expression changed immediately, becoming serious and worried. "That place?" he said, scratching his white beard. "Lady, that trading post sits right on the edge of Apache territory. Your uncle, God rest his soul, he knew how to deal with them folks. But that was before the troubles got worse." He went on to explain that the Apache people, led by a chief the settlers called Dakota, had been fighting to keep their lands. The army kept pushing them back, trying to force them onto reservations. The Apache fought back, and the whole territory had become a powder keg ready to explode. "Chief Dakota," the old man said, lowering his voice like he was speaking about a ghost. "He's the fiercest of them all. Lost his family to the cavalry, they say. Now he's got nothing left to lose, which makes him the most dangerous kind of enemy." Rebecca listened with growing fear. She had known the journey would be difficult, but she hadn't realized she was heading into the middle of a war. The old man must have seen the terror in her eyes because his voice softened. "Look, I'm just being honest with you. You got a baby coming and you're alone. That's a hard situation anywhere, but out there, in that trading post, I'll be real surprised if you last a month. He offered to help her find work in Santa Fe instead. He knew someone who might hire her to do washing, despite her condition. It wouldn't be much, but it would be safer than heading into Apache country. Rebecca almost said yes. Every logical part of her brain screamed at her to accept the offer. But then she thought about staying in Santa Fe, where people would whisper about her, where she would always be that woman with the baby and no husband. At least at the trading post she would be alone. At least there no one would judge her. "Thank you," she told the old man, "but I'm going to the trading post. It's all I have left." He shook his head sadly but didn't try to change her mind. The next morning he helped her find a guide willing to take her the rest of the way. The guide was a weathered old tracker named Bill, who had seen more than his share of hard times. He agreed to take her, but he wasn't happy about it. "You're making a mistake," Bill told her as they set out on horseback, Rebecca's few belongings packed on a mule. "But I suppose you've already been told that plenty of times." The last leg of the journey took 3 days. The landscape became more and more desolate. Red rocks rose from the desert floor like giant monuments. Cacti stood like silent sentinels. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and at night the temperature dropped so fast that Rebecca shivered despite the blankets Bill gave her. On the 3rd day, they crested a hill and Bill pointed down into a valley. "There it is, your uncle's trading post." Rebecca's heart sank. From a distance she could see that the building was in terrible shape. One corner of the roof had caved in. The windows were broken. Part of the fence that had once surrounded it lay scattered across the desert floor. As they got closer, it looked even worse. The trading post had been ransacked. Shelves were overturned, goods were scattered everywhere, and animal droppings covered the floor. It was clear that no one had lived here for a long time. Bill helped her unload her things, then stood looking at the wreckage with his hands on his hips. "Lady, I can't in good conscience leave you here. This place is a disaster. You got a baby coming any day now. You got no supplies to speak of. And you got Apache all around these hills. Come back to Santa Fe with me, please." But Rebecca had made her choice. She had come too far to turn back now. She thanked Bill for his help, paid him the rest of what she owed, and watched him ride away, shaking his head the whole time. When he was gone, and the sound of his horse's hooves had faded into silence, Rebecca stood alone in front of the ruined trading post. The baby kicked hard inside her, as if asking what kind of place this was. Rebecca looked up at the vast sky above her, then down at her swollen belly. "Well, little one," she said out loud, her voice the only human sound in all that emptiness. "I guess it's just you and me now. Let's see what we can do with this place." She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. First, she swept out the worst of the debris. Then she found some boards that weren't completely rotten and used them to cover the broken windows. It wasn't much, but it would keep the wind out. As the sun set on her first day at the trading post, Rebecca sat on the front step and looked out at the desert. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink. In the distance, she could see mountains silhouetted against the fading light. It was beautiful in a harsh, lonely way. Somewhere out there she knew the Apache people were watching. She had no idea that among those watching eyes was a chief who had his own story of loss and pain. She had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. All she knew was that she had made it this far. She had survived, and tomorrow she would wake up and survive another day. That's all she could think about now. One day at a time, one breath at a time, until her baby came and she figured out what came next. The desert night closed in around her, full of strange sounds and endless darkness. But inside the trading post, Rebecca lit a small candle and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the smallest possibility that hope might be possible again. 6 weeks passed at the trading post, and Rebecca had managed to survive. She had patched the roof as best she could. She had cleaned every corner of the building. She had even started organizing the few supplies left behind, thinking that maybe, somehow, she could actually make this work. But on a cold November evening, when the first snow of winter began to fall, everything changed. Rebecca woke in the middle of the night to a pain so intense it took her breath away. It started in her lower back and wrapped around her belly like an iron band. She knew immediately what it meant. The baby was coming. She was completely alone. There was no doctor for 100 miles, no midwife, no mother or sister to hold her hand. There was just Rebecca, alone in a broken-down trading post with a baby determined to be born right now. The pain came in waves. Between each wave, Rebecca tried to prepare. She boiled water on the small stove. She found clean cloths. She said prayers to a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore. And when the pain became so bad she couldn't stand, she lay down on the bed and did the only thing she could do. She endured. Outside, the snow fell harder. The wind howled around the trading post like a living thing. Inside, Rebecca screamed and cried and pushed, following instincts she didn't know she had. Her hands shook with fear and exhaustion, but somehow impossibly she guided her baby into the world. When she heard that first cry, so small and angry and alive, Rebecca started crying too. She had done it. Against all odds, with no help, she had brought her child safely into this world. The baby was a girl, tiny but healthy, with a strong pair of lungs and a head full of dark hair. Rebecca wrapped her daughter in the cleanest cloth she could find and held her close. "I'm going to call you Hope," she whispered, kissing the baby's forehead, "because you're the only hope I have left in this world." For 3 days, Rebecca and Hope existed in their own little bubble. Rebecca was weak from the birth and had lost more blood than was safe. She knew she should be getting up, finding food, keeping the fire going. But she could barely lift her head without the room spinning. On the 3rd day, she woke to the sound of horses. Her heart started pounding with fear. Through the frosted window, she could see several riders approaching. Even in her fevered state, she could tell they were Apache warriors. Their horses moved like shadows across the snow. Rebecca clutched Hope to her chest. This was it. This was how they would die. She had heard all the stories about what happened to settlers who ventured too close to Apache territory. She closed her eyes and held her baby tighter, trying to shield her from whatever was about to happen. The door opened slowly. Rebecca was too weak to move, too weak even to scream. A tall figure filled the doorway, blocking out the light. She could see his silhouette, broad-shouldered and imposing. She could see the weapons he carried. The man stepped inside, and Rebecca got her first clear look at him. He was indeed tall, with long, dark hair and a face marked by old scars. His eyes were the darkest eyes she had ever seen, intense and penetrating. This had to be Dakota, the fierce chief she had heard about, the one who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose. Rebecca waited for him to draw his weapon. She waited for the end. Instead, he just looked at her, then at the baby in her arms. His expression was impossible to read. He said something in Apache, his voice deep and commanding. Rebecca had no idea what the words meant. She shook her head weakly, tears running down her face. Dakota turned and called to someone outside. A moment later, an older woman entered. Her face was weathered by years and sun, but her eyes were kind. She looked at Rebecca, saw the blood-soaked bedding, saw how pale and feverish Rebecca was, and immediately started talking rapidly in Apache. The woman, whose name Rebecca would later learn was Nashota, began working quickly. She had brought herbs and special medicines. She built up the fire to warm the room. She examined Rebecca with gentle, skilled hands, clearly seeing the signs of infection and exhaustion. Dakota watched for a moment, then left the trading post. Rebecca was too weak to wonder where he was going. She just lay there while Nashota worked, feeling the woman's healing touch begin to ease some of her pain. Nashota brewed a tea from herbs she had brought and made Rebecca drink it. It tasted bitter and earthy, but almost immediately Rebecca felt some of her strength returning. The older woman cleaned her wounds with more herbs, wrapped her in warm furs, and then turned her attention to little Hope. Nashota examined the baby carefully, making soft cooing sounds. Despite everything, Rebecca felt herself relaxing. This woman wasn't here to hurt them. She was here to help, but why? When Dakota returned an hour later, he carried bundles of food, more furs, and supplies. He placed them in the corner of the room, then stood back, studying Rebecca with those intense dark eyes. He spoke a few words in English, heavily accented but clear enough. "Baby is sacred. New life is gift from Creator. We protect." Rebecca stared at him in shock. She had expected violence. She had expected death. Instead, these people who were supposed to be her enemies were saving her life. Nashota said something to Dakota, and he nodded. The old woman turned to Rebecca and in broken English mixed with hand gestures, explained that they had been watching her. They had seen her arrive weeks ago. seen her struggle to repair the trading post, seen her determination to survive. When they realized she was alone and about to give birth, Nashoda had insisted they help when the time came. In Apache culture, Nashoda explained through gestures and simple words. A new baby was a blessing from the Creator. It didn't matter whose baby it was or how it came to be. Life was life and life was sacred. They couldn't stand by and watch a mother and newborn die, even if that mother was a white settler. Dakota added more wood to the fire, his movements careful and deliberate. Rebecca noticed how he looked at Hope, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart ache. It was grief, raw and painful, mixed with something else. Longing, maybe, or remembrance. Nashoda saw Rebecca noticing and said quietly in careful English, "Chief lose his wife. Lose baby son. 2 winters passed. Soldiers come. Kill many." Suddenly Rebecca understood. This fierce warrior had known the same kind of loss she had, maybe worse. He had loved and lost. He had held his own child and then had that child taken from him by violence and cruelty. "I'm sorry," Rebecca whispered, though she knew the words were inadequate. "I'm so sorry." Dakota met her eyes for a long moment and something passed between them. An understanding. They were both people who had lost everything. They were both survivors in a harsh world that seemed determined to break them. The Apache visitor stayed for several hours, making sure Rebecca had everything she needed. Before they left, Nashoda showed Rebecca how to make the healing tea, how to keep herself strong. She left a bundle of dried herbs with instructions conveyed through gestures and drawings. As Dakota prepared to leave, he paused at the door. In his halting English, he said, "We come again. Bring more food. You need help make fire smoke black. We watch. We come." Then they were gone, disappearing into the snowy landscape as silently as they had arrived. Rebecca lay there holding Hope, trying to understand what had just happened. The people she had been taught to fear had just saved her life. The savage chief had shown her more kindness than her own family ever had. That night, as she fed Hope and listened to the wind outside, Rebecca felt something shift inside her. The world wasn't what she had been taught it was. Good and evil weren't as simple as white and Apache, civilized and savage, righteous and sinner. Sometimes, she realized, the people who society cast out were the ones who understood mercy best. Sometimes the ones labeled as enemies were the ones who showed up when no one else would. She pulled Hope closer and looked out the window at the stars beginning to emerge as the snow clouds cleared. Somewhere out there, Chief Dakota and his people were returning to their camp. Somewhere out there, a man who had every reason to hate her people had chosen kindness instead. Rebecca didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. This first encounter was the start of something that would change her life forever. It was the first step on a path she never could have imagined, a path that would lead her to discover that love and family can be found in the most unexpected places. But for now, she was just grateful to be alive. She was grateful for her daughter, and she was grateful that in a world that had shown her so much cruelty, there were still people capable of showing mercy to a stranger in need. Winter settled over the desert like a heavy blanket, and the visits from Dakota and his people continued. At first they came every few days, bringing food and checking on Rebecca and Hope. Nashoda, the medicine woman, seemed to have taken a special interest in making sure both mother and baby stayed healthy. Rebecca slowly regained her strength. The herbs Nashoda brought worked better than any medicine she had known back east. The old woman showed her which plants could heal wounds, which could bring down a fever, and which could help a new mother produce milk for her baby. Rebecca watched carefully and tried to learn. Even though the language barrier made everything difficult, Hope was growing stronger every day. She was a good baby, rarely fussing, and she seemed fascinated by the world around her. When Nashoda visited, the old woman would hold Hope and sing to her in Apache, ancient songs that had been passed down for generations. The baby would stare up at her with wide, curious eyes. Dakota usually didn't stay long during these visits. He would bring supplies, make sure the trading post was secure, check that Rebecca had enough firewood. Then he would leave, always watching the horizon like he expected trouble to appear at any moment. But Rebecca noticed that before he left, he would always look at Hope. Just for a moment, his hard expression would soften, and she could see the pain of his loss written across his face. One day, when Dakota brought fresh meat from a deer hunt, Rebecca gathered her courage and tried to talk to him. She had been practicing Apache words that Nashota had taught her, and she wanted to thank him properly. "Ah-he-he," she said, which meant thank you. The word felt strange in her mouth, but she said it as clearly as she could. Dakota looked surprised. Then, for the first time since she had met him, she saw the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "You learn our tongue," he said in English. "Nashota teaches me," Rebecca replied. "I want to understand. I want to say thank you the right way." He nodded approvingly. From that day on, Dakota began teaching her more words during his visits. He would point at things and say the Apache word: fire, water, sky, horse. Rebecca would repeat the words until she got them right. In return, she helped him with his English, correcting his pronunciation gently and teaching him new words. These language lessons became a regular part of their visits. Sometimes Nashota would join in, laughing when Rebecca mispronounced a word or when Dakota struggled with a difficult English phrase. Despite the hardship of their lives, these moments held a strange kind of joy. As the winter wore on, Rebecca learned more about Dakota and his people. She learned that his tribe had lived in these lands for countless generations. They knew every water source, every plant, every animal. This was their home in a way that white settlers could never understand. She learned that the conflict with the settlers had been going on for years. The Apache had watched as more and more white people came, claiming land that wasn't theirs, killing buffalo and deer without thought for the future, building fences across ancient trails. They had tried to share the land at first, but the settlers wanted everything. Then came the soldiers. The army had orders to force all Apache onto reservations, small pieces of land where they would be dependent on government supplies and controlled by Indian agents. Many tribes had already been forced onto these reservations. Dakota's band was one of the few still free, still fighting to keep their way of life. Nashota told Rebecca, through a mix of Apache, English, and gestures, about the day Dakota lost his family. Soldiers had attacked their camp during peace talks. They claimed the Apache had broken the agreement, though Dakota's people insisted they had done no such thing. In the chaos, Dakota's wife had been shot while holding their infant son. Both had died before Dakota could reach them. After that, something in Dakota had changed. He became harder, more determined. He led his warriors with a fierce intensity that made the soldiers fear him, but he also made sure his people followed strict rules about who they attacked and why. He refused to harm women and children, even white ones. Some of the younger warriors complained about this, but Dakota wouldn't budge. He had seen enough death. He wouldn't become the monster the soldiers claimed he was. Understanding this, Rebecca began to see Dakota differently. He wasn't a savage. He was a man trying to protect his people, a man dealing with grief the only way he knew how. In some ways, they weren't so different. They were both fighting to survive in a world that seemed determined to crush them. One day in late January, Rebecca saw something that changed everything. She was outside gathering firewood when she saw riders approaching. But these weren't Apache. These were white men, ranchers from the look of them, and they didn't look friendly. There were 3 of them, rough-looking men with hard faces. They rode right up to the trading post and dismounted without asking permission. The leader, a big man with a red beard, looked at Rebecca like she was something dirty on his boot. "You the woman living here?" he demanded. "I am," Rebecca said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is my uncle's trading post. I have every right to be here." Redbeard laughed, a mean sound. "Your uncle's dead, lady, and this land is too close to Apache territory. We're taking it for our ranch. You need to pack up and leave." "I'm not leaving," Rebecca said firmly. "This is my property." One of the other men spat on the ground. "You've been trading with them, Apache, haven't you? We've seen their tracks around here. You're giving them supplies, probably giving them information about our movements, too." "I haven't done anything wrong," Rebecca protested, though her heart was racing. "I'm just trying to survive." "Well, you can survive somewhere else," Redbeard said. He started walking toward the trading post. "We're giving you 1 day to clear out. If you're still here tomorrow, we'll burn this place down with you in it." Suddenly, an arrow thudded into the ground right in front of Redbeard's feet. Everyone froze. The 3 ranchers looked around wildly, hands going to their guns. Rebecca looked up at the rocks above the trading post and saw them. Apache warriors, at least a dozen of them, arrows notched and ready. And standing in front was Dakota, his bow drawn. He said something in Apache, his voice carrying across the desert air. Rebecca didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. It was a warning. Redbeard's face went white. His hand moved away from his gun very slowly. "We don't want trouble with you people," he said, though his voice shook. Dakota spoke in English this time, his words clear and cold. "This woman under our protection. You leave. You not come back. You touch her, you touch us." The three ranchers looked at each other. They were outnumbered and outmatched. Slowly, carefully, they backed toward their horses and mounted up. Redbeard looked at Rebecca one last time. "You're making a mistake, lady. Choosing them over your own kind." Then they rode off, disappearing in a cloud of dust. As soon as they were gone, Dakota and his warriors emerged from the rocks. They had been watching. They had been protecting her. They had probably been protecting her for weeks without her even knowing. Dakota approached Rebecca. She was shaking, partly from fear and partly from relief. "Thank you," she said in Apache. You saved me." He looked at her for a long moment. "You different," he finally said in English. "Most white people, they see us as enemy. You see us as people." "You saw me as a person first," Rebecca replied. "When everyone else turned their backs on me, you helped. You showed me kindness." Something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them quite understood yet. It was respect, yes, but it was also the beginning of something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. Two souls who had been broken by the world, finding understanding in each other. From that day on, the relationship between Rebecca and Dakota's band changed. She was no longer just someone they were helping out of obligation or belief in sacred life. She had become someone they chose to protect. And Rebecca, in turn, made her own choice. She would help them however she could. She started setting aside the best supplies from her meager stores for when they visited. She learned more of their language, more of their customs. When young Apache children came with the adults, she would let them play with Hope and would tell them stories, using hand gestures to make up for the words she didn't know yet. Nashota was delighted. She told Rebecca that she had hoped for this, that Rebecca might become a bridge between their two worlds. It was dangerous, Nashota admitted. Many white people would see Rebecca's friendship with the Apache as betrayal, and some Apache, especially the younger warriors who had lost family to soldiers, didn't trust any white person. But Dakota supported it. He made it clear to his people that Rebecca was to be treated as a friend, and he made it clear to Rebecca, in his quiet way, that he valued what she was trying to do. As winter began to loosen its grip and early spring arrived, Rebecca realized something. She was happy. For the first time since she could remember, she was genuinely happy.
She had a daughter she loved.
She had friends who accepted her. She had a purpose. She had also started to notice other things. The way her heart beat a little faster when Dakota arrived. The way she found herself watching for him, listening for the sound of horses that might mean he was coming. The way his rare smiles made her feel warm inside. Spring arrived in the desert with a burst of color that surprised Rebecca. Wildflowers bloomed between the rocks, painting the landscape in shades of yellow, red, and purple. The harsh winter was over, and with the warmer weather came new possibilities. Rebecca's trading post was actually functioning now. A few brave travelers and settlers, those who didn't care about her reputation or her friendship with the Apache, had started stopping by. She traded fairly with everyone who came, asking no questions and passing no judgment. Word began to spread that her post was a safe place, a neutral ground where Apache and settlers could both come without fear. This was dangerous, of course. There were plenty of people who didn't want peace. There were settlers who wanted all Apache dead or locked up on reservations. There were Apache warriors who wanted all white people driven from their lands. But somehow at Rebecca's little trading post, an uneasy peace held. Dakota came by more often now. Sometimes he brought things to trade, beautiful baskets and pottery made by the women in his band. Sometimes he came just to check on Rebecca and Hope, and sometimes Rebecca suspected he came just to see her. Their conversations had grown longer and deeper. Dakota's English was improving, and Rebecca's Apache was getting better too. They could talk about more than just simple things now. They talked about the land, about the seasons, about their hopes and fears. One evening in April, Dakota arrived just as the sun was setting. Rebecca was outside with Hope, who was now old enough to sit up on her own. The baby was giggling at a butterfly that had landed nearby. "She grows strong," Dakota said, dismounting from his horse. He walked over and crouched down near Hope, keeping a respectful distance but watching her with obvious affection. "She does," Rebecca agreed. Thanks to Nashoda's care. And thanks to you for everything you've brought us. Dakota was quiet for a moment, watching Hope try to catch the butterfly with her tiny hands. She reminds me, he said softly, and Rebecca knew he was thinking of his own lost child. Tell me about them, Rebecca said gently. Your wife and son. If it doesn't hurt too much to remember. Dakota was silent for so long that Rebecca thought he wouldn't answer, but then he began to speak, his voice low and full of old pain. His wife's name had been Kaya. She had been strong and brave, a skilled rider who could track deer better than most warriors. Their son, born in the spring 3 years ago, had been named after an eagle because of how loudly he cried when he was born. They had been happy, Dakota said. He had thought he knew what his life would be. He would lead his people, protect them, teach his son to be strong. Kaya would teach their children the old ways, the stories and songs. They would grow old together, surrounded by grandchildren. But then came that terrible day. The soldiers had called for a peace talk. Dakota had brought his family because he thought it would show good faith. Instead, shots rang out. To this day, no one knew who fired first, but it didn't matter. In the chaos, Kaya had been hit. She fell holding their baby, and when Dakota reached them, both were already gone. I hold them, Dakota said, his voice breaking slightly. I hold them and I feel their blood on my hands. I tell Kaya I'm sorry, so sorry. But she already gone. They both gone. Rebecca felt tears running down her face. Without thinking, she reached out and touched Dakota's hand. I'm so sorry. No one should have to lose their family like that. Dakota looked down at her hand on his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, carefully, he turned his hand and held hers. It was the first time they had really touched, and the connection felt electric. You understand loss, he said, meeting her eyes. Your people turn their back. Leave you alone with baby. This also like death. Yes, Rebecca whispered. It is. Sometimes I think it would have hurt less if they had just killed me outright. Instead, they killed who I was and left me to figure out how to keep living. They sat there as the sun set, holding hands, while Hope played nearby. It was a simple moment, but it felt monumental. They were both people who had been broken by loss, and somehow, in each other's presence, they felt a little less broken. That night marked a change in their relationship. Dakota started coming by almost every day. He taught Rebecca practical skills she needed to survive in the desert. He showed her how to track animals by their footprints, how to find water by watching where birds flew, how to identify which plants were safe to eat and which were poisonous. In return, Rebecca taught him to read. She had a few books that had survived her journey, and Dakota was fascinated by the idea of words captured on paper. He learned quickly, his intelligent mind grasping the concepts faster than she expected. Soon he could read simple passages, and he was proud of this accomplishment. They also began teaching each other deeper things. Dakota taught her about Apache beliefs, about how everything in nature was connected, about respecting the land and taking only what you needed. He taught her that strength wasn't just about fighting, but about knowing when to bend so you wouldn't break. Rebecca taught him about her world too, though increasingly she felt like it wasn't her world anymore. She told him about big cities back east, about trains and telegraphs, about the rapid changes sweeping across America. Dakota listened with interest but also with sadness, understanding that these changes were what was pushing his people off their lands. One day in late May, disaster struck the Apache camp. A fever swept through, hitting the children especially hard. 3 children fell ill, including Nashoda's own grandson, a boy of about 6 years old. The Apache had medicine, but this fever was different, more dangerous than what they usually dealt with. Nashoda came to Rebecca in desperation. Could the white woman's medicine help? Rebecca wasn't a doctor, but she had grown up watching her mother care for sick neighbors. She knew some things, and she had a few medical supplies left from what she'd brought from the east. She didn't hesitate. Take me to them, she said. For the next 3 weeks, Rebecca practically lived in the Apache camp. She moved between the sick children using everything she knew. She combined her knowledge with Nashoda's, creating treatments that drew from both traditions. She made poultices and teas. She sat up through long nights, sponging down fevered bodies, singing soft songs to frightened children. Dakota watched her work with growing admiration. Here was a white woman who had every reason to keep her distance from his people, risking her own health to save Apache children. She asked for nothing in return. She just worked tirelessly, her hands gentle, her voice soothing. Slowly, the children began to improve. One by one, their fevers broke. Nashoda's grandson was the sickest, and there was one night when everyone thought they would lose him. Rebecca refused to give up. She stayed by his side, refusing to sleep, doing everything she could think of to help. When the boy's fever finally broke just before dawn, Nashoda wept and hugged Rebecca so tightly she could barely breathe. The whole camp celebrated. They had expected to lose at least one child, maybe all three. But all three survived, and they knew it was because of Rebecca's tireless care. After that, Rebecca's status in the camp changed completely. She wasn't just someone they were helping anymore. She was one of them. The women invited her into their circles, teaching her how to tan hides and weave baskets. The men nodded respectfully when she passed. The children ran to her, calling her by a name they had given her that meant healing hands. But the most significant change was in how Dakota looked at her. The admiration in his eyes had deepened into something more. He found reasons to be near her. When she returned to the trading post after the fever crisis was over, he came with her and stayed late into the evening, talking by the fire. One night under a sky full of stars, Dakota finally spoke what was in his heart. They were sitting outside the trading post, Hope asleep inside, and the night was quiet and peaceful. "Rebecca," he said, using her name carefully. He still sometimes struggled with English sounds. "I must tell you something." She turned to look at him, her heart suddenly beating faster. "What is it?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. "When Kaya died, I think my heart died too. I think I never feel again. Just anger, just pain. But then you come. Alone, afraid but strong. So strong." He looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting starlight. "You teach me something. You teach me that heart can heal. Maybe not all way. Maybe scar always there. But can beat again. Can feel again." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. "Dakota, I love you," he said simply. "My heart choose you. But I must be honest. Love me, your life become harder. White people already turn back on you. If they know you love Apache chief, they hate you more. My own people, some of them not trust. Some say white woman cannot be trusted, even you. And army, they hunt me. Always hunt me. Love me. You choose hard path." Rebecca looked at this man who had shown her more kindness and respect than anyone in her old life ever had. This man who had saved her, protected her, taught her. This man who had learned to love again despite his own terrible grief. She thought about everything she had lost. Her family, her home, her good name. But she also thought about everything she had gained. Strength, purpose, true friendship, and now the possibility of real love. "Dakota," she said, reaching for his hand. "I already lost everything once. It taught me that the things I thought mattered." Love, Rebecca discovered, didn't make life easier. If anything, it made things more complicated. But it also made life feel worth living again. She and Dakota tried to keep their relationship quiet at first. He would visit her at the trading post, and to anyone watching it looked like he was just checking on her as he had been doing for months. But now when he arrived, Rebecca's heart would leap. When he left, she would count the hours until he could return. They stole moments together whenever they could. Sometimes Dakota would arrive after dark, and they would sit by the fire, talking softly while Hope slept. He would tell her stories about his childhood, about learning to ride and hunt, about the vast territories the Apache used to roam freely. She would tell him about her own childhood, about books and music, and a world so different from this one that it seemed like a dream. He brought her gifts, not expensive things, but meaningful ones. A necklace made of turquoise stones, a blanket woven by the women of his band, with patterns that told stories, a carved wooden toy for Hope that was shaped like a horse. Each gift was given with such care that it made Rebecca's heart ache with happiness. Nashoda was delighted by their relationship. She had seen it coming long before either of them admitted it. She began teaching Rebecca the customs and ceremonies of Apache courtship and marriage. There were specific rituals, specific ways of showing respect to each other and to their union. Rebecca learned them all eagerly, wanting to honor Dakota's culture. But not everyone was happy. Some of the younger warriors in Dakota's band grumbled about their chief's attachment to a white woman. They had lost family members to white violence. They had seen their lands taken, their people killed. How could Dakota trust any white person, let alone love one? Dakota addressed these concerns directly. He called a council and spoke honestly. "Yes, Rebecca is white," he said in their language. "But she is not our enemy. She saved our children when they were sick. She treats us with respect. She learns our ways. She was cast out by her own people, just as the white settlers want to cast us out. One young warrior named Chato stood up. Today she is good. But what about tomorrow? What if the army comes? Will she choose us or them? She has already chosen, Dakota replied firmly. She chose us when she stayed here, when she helped our children, when she opened her heart to our ways. I trust her with my life. And if that trust is wrong, Chato challenged. If she betrays us? Then I will deal with it, Dakota said, his voice hard. But until that day comes, she is under my protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me. The challenge in his voice was clear. Chato and the others backed down, though some still looked unhappy. Dakota was their chief, chosen for his wisdom and strength. They would follow his lead, even if they had doubts. The real test came in early July. Rebecca was at the trading post with Hope when 3 men rode up. But these weren't ranchers or ordinary travelers. They wore parts of cavalry uniforms, though not complete uniforms. They had the look of men who lived on the edge of the law, men who did the dirty work that official soldiers couldn't be seen doing. The leader was a tall man with cold blue eyes and a cruel smile. He dismounted and walked right into the trading post without asking permission. You the woman who's been trading with the Apache? He demanded. Rebecca held Hope close. I trade with whoever comes here as long as they deal fairly. The man looked around the trading post, noting the Apache made baskets and pottery. You're doing more than trading. Word is you're living with them. Word is you've taken up with that murderer, Dakota. Rebecca's blood ran cold, but she kept her voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. I run a trading post, that's all. Don't lie to me, the man snarled. He stepped closer, invading her space. We've been watching. We've seen Dakota coming here. We know you've been in his camp. One of the other men spoke up. She's a traitor. She's probably giving them information about troop movements, helping them plan their attacks. I've done no such thing, Rebecca protested. I'm just trying to survive out here. I help anyone who needs help. The leader grabbed her arm roughly. You're coming with us. We're taking you to the fort. The commander will want to question you about Dakota's plans. Hope started crying at the violence in the man's voice. Rebecca pulled away from him, her own anger rising. I'm not going anywhere with you. I haven't broken any laws. You're aiding the enemy, the man said. That's treason. He reached for her again, and Rebecca backed away. Her hand found a heavy iron skillet on the shelf behind her. She grabbed it, holding it like a weapon. Get out of my home now, the man laughed. You think you can stop us? There's 3 of us and 1 of you. He moved toward her, and Rebecca raised the skillet. But before anything else could happen, an arrow shot through the open door and embedded itself in the wooden post right next to the man's head. Everyone froze. Dakota stepped into the doorway, his bow drawn with another arrow already notched. Behind him, Rebecca could see more warriors positioned around the trading post. They had been watching as they always did. They had seen the trouble and come immediately. Dakota spoke in English, his voice deadly calm. You leave, now. You touch her, you die. The leader's face went red with anger, but he wasn't stupid. He was outnumbered and outmatched. This isn't over, he said, backing toward the door. The army's going to hear about this. They're going to hear about a white woman who's betrayed her own kind for a savage. Go, Dakota said, his bow still drawn. Tell Army what you want. Tell them Dakota protect what is his. The 3 men mounted their horses and rode off, but their parting looks promised trouble. As soon as they were gone, Rebecca's legs gave out and she sank to the floor, still holding Hope. She was shaking with fear and adrenaline. Dakota knelt beside her, putting his bow aside to pull her into his arms. You safe now, he murmured. I hear. I protect you. This is what you warned me about, Rebecca said, her voice trembling. This is what loving you means. I know. I'm sorry. She looked up at him, seeing the guilt and worry in his eyes. Don't be sorry. I meant what I said. I choose you. I choose this. I'm just frightened. I frightened too, he admitted. Those men, they not official soldiers. They part of group that hunt Apache for money. They worse than army because they have no rules. They kill women, children, anyone. Nashota, who had come with the other warriors, entered the trading post. She looked at Rebecca with concern. You cannot stay here anymore, she said in Apache, which Rebecca now understood well enough to follow. Not safe. Those men will come back, maybe with more. She right, Dakota said. You must come to our camp. Stay with us where we can protect you proper. Rebecca knew he was right, but the implications were huge. Moving to the Apache camp would be a clear statement. It would mark her completely as one of them. There would be no going back, no pretending she was just a neutral trader. She would be declaring herself as Dakota's woman, as someone who had chosen the Apache over her own people. But what choice did she have? Those men would come back. Next time, Dakota and his warriors might not arrive in time. And more than that, she realized she wanted to be with Dakota. She wanted to be part of his world, not just living on the edge of it. "All right," she said. "We'll come. Hope and I will come to the camp." Relief flooded Dakota's face. "You sure?" "I'm sure. This trading post isn't my home anymore. Home is wherever you are." That night, Rebecca packed what little they needed. The Apache helped her move some supplies, though she left most things behind. The trading post would stay here, and maybe someday it could be useful again. But for now, survival was more important than property. As they rode toward the Apache camp, Hope sleeping in a carrier on Rebecca's back, Dakota rode beside her. The desert stars were brilliant above them, and despite everything, Rebecca felt a strange sense of peace. Yes, she was giving up the last connection to her old life. Yes, she was putting herself in even more danger. But she was also finally truly choosing her own path. "What happened now?" Dakota asked quietly. "Those men, they tell Army about us. Then we'll face it together," Rebecca said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." He reached over and took her hand. "In my culture," he said, "when man and woman choose each other, they have ceremony. They make promises before Creator and people. You want this? You want be my wife in Apache way?" Rebecca's heart swelled. Despite all the fear and uncertainty, this was what she wanted more than anything. "Yes," she said. "I want that. I want to be your wife. Then we have ceremony soon, before more trouble come. Nashota will teach you what you need to know. We do this right with all traditions. Show everyone, Apache and white people, that we choose each other." They rode on through the night, and with each mile, Rebecca felt like she was shedding the last pieces of who she used to be. The proper Boston girl was gone. The shamed outcast was gone. She was becoming someone new, someone stronger. She was becoming the woman brave enough to love an Apache chief, the woman strong enough to build a bridge between two worlds, even if that bridge was made dangerous by hate and fear on both sides. The journey ahead would be hard. She knew that. But looking at Dakota riding beside her, at Hope sleeping peacefully at the starlit desert that had become her home, she felt ready. Whatever storms were coming, she would weather them. The Apache camp welcomed Rebecca with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Some of the people had come to know her well during her visits, especially after she had saved the children from fever. But living among them permanently was different. This was their home, their sacred space, and she was still, undeniably, a white woman. Nashota took Rebecca under her wing, teaching her the daily rhythms of Apache life. Rebecca learned to prepare food in the traditional way, to set up and take down the shelters they used, to read the weather signs that told them when to move camp. She learned the songs that were sung during different activities, the stories that were passed from generation to generation. Hope thrived in the camp. The Apache children adored her, this little one with lighter skin and different features. They played with her gently, teaching her their games even though she was still too young to really understand. The women of the tribe helped Rebecca care for her, sharing their wisdom about raising children. Preparations began for the wedding ceremony. In Apache tradition, marriages were sacred bonds that required the blessing of the community and the Creator. Nashota explained each part of the ceremony to Rebecca, each symbol and prayer. It was beautiful and meaningful in ways that Rebecca's old world's formal church weddings had never been. Dakota provided horses as a bride gift, a sign of his wealth and his commitment. Rebecca had nothing material to give, but Nashota assured her that what she brought was more valuable. She brought her heart, her skills, her willingness to become part of the people. That was worth more than any possession. The ceremony was planned for the next full moon, just 2 weeks away. Rebecca spent those weeks preparing, learning, becoming more integrated into the tribe. She could see that even the skeptical warriors were starting to accept her. She worked hard, never complained, and showed genuine respect for their ways. But on a hot August morning, everything changed. A scout rode into camp at full speed, his horse lathered with sweat. He reported to Dakota immediately. A large group of cavalry soldiers was approaching, led by an officer. They were flying a white flag, which traditionally meant they wanted to talk, not fight. But the scout said something else too, something that made Dakota's face go dark with worry. The officer leading the cavalry was Captain James Wilson, a man known for his hatred of the Apache and his brutal tactics. He had been involved in several massacres of peaceful Apache camps. He claimed afterward that the camps had been hostile, but Dakota's people knew the truth. Wilson killed first and lied about it later. Why he come here? Dakota asked the scout. We not break treaty. We stay on our land. The scout shook his head. He says he wants you to surrender. He says government orders all Apache to go to reservation. He give you 1 week to decide. Dakota's jaw clenched. They all knew what reservations meant. Cramped spaces. Government rations that were often spoiled or never arrived. Indian agents who stole what little supplies did come. Disease and hunger. It was a slow death instead of a quick one. But there was more news. The scout said that Wilson had specifically mentioned a white woman. He knew about Rebecca. He knew she was in the camp, and he wanted to see her. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. How did Wilson know about her? Then she remembered the 3 men who had come to the trading post. They must have reported to Wilson, told him about her relationship with Dakota. I go talk to him, Dakota said. Find out what he really want. I'm coming with you, Rebecca said immediately. Too dangerous. If he wants to see me, then he'll see me. If I hide, he'll use that against us. I need to face this. Dakota didn't like it, but he understood her reasoning. They rode out together to meet the cavalry, along with several of Dakota's senior warriors. Nashota insisted on coming too, as an elder and advisor. Captain Wilson was waiting with his troops positioned on a ridge overlooking the camp. It was a deliberate show of force, a reminder that he had the power to attack if he chose. He was a square-jawed man with gray hair and cold eyes that held no warmth or mercy. When he saw Rebecca riding beside Dakota, his eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with disapproval. So it's true, he said. You've taken up with these savages. I live with these people, Rebecca said, keeping her voice steady. They saved my life when my own people turned their backs on me. Wilson snorted. Your own people? Yes, I know about you. I made inquiries. You're the Boston merchant's daughter who got herself in trouble. Came west to hide your shame. Rebecca felt the old familiar burn of humiliation, but she pushed it down. What do you want, Captain? I want this Apache band to surrender and move to the reservation, Wilson said bluntly. Government orders. All Apache must be on reservation land by the end of this month. This is our land, Dakota said in English. Treaty says we can stay. We not break treaty. The treaty is void, Wilson replied. Too many problems with Apache raiding. The government has decided that all Apache must be controlled. We not raid, Dakota insisted. We hunt, we live, but we not attack settlers. That's not what I've heard. Wilson's smile was cruel. But I'm willing to make a deal. Surrender peacefully. Go to the reservation and there will be no violence. Your people will be safe. You have my word. Dakota's laugh was bitter. Your word? Like word given at Sand Creek? Like word given at Skeleton Canyon? We know what your word means, Captain. Your word means death. Wilson's face reddened. I'm trying to prevent bloodshed here. But if you refuse, I have orders to use force. I have 200 soldiers. You have maybe 40 warriors. You cannot win this fight, it was true. They were vastly outnumbered. If it came to battle, Dakota's band would be destroyed. Rebecca could see the terrible calculation happening in Dakota's mind. Fight and die, or surrender and die slowly on a reservation. There's another matter, Wilson continued, turning his attention back to Rebecca. You, miss, you need to return to civilization. You're clearly being held here against your will. I'm not being held against my will, Rebecca said firmly. I'm here by choice. You've been brainwashed, Wilson said, as if explaining something to a child. It's understandable. You've been isolated, traumatized, but it's time to come back to your own people. I can arrange for you to travel east back to your family. I'm sure they'd take you back if you renounced these savages and returned to Christian society. Rebecca felt a surge of anger. My family publicly disowned me, Captain. They told me I was dead to them. The only people who showed me kindness were the Apache. Dakota and his people saved my life and my daughter's life. So no, I will not renounce them. I will not leave. Wilson's eyes hardened. Then you're a traitor. A white woman who has betrayed her race. When we take this band to the reservation, you'll be arrested and charged with aiding the enemy. She has done nothing wrong, Dakota said, his voice dangerous. She heal sick, she help everyone. She not your enemy? That's not for you to decide, Chief. Wilson looked back at his troops, then at Dakota. You have until noon tomorrow to decide. Surrender peacefully or we attack. And either way, the woman comes with us. No, Dakota said flatly. She stays with me. Wilson's hand moved to his gun. Are you threatening a United States Army officer? In an instant, every Apache warrior had an arrow notched. The tension was explosive. One wrong move and blood would spill. Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Please, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Please, everyone calm down. Captain Wilson, you say you want to prevent bloodshed. Then let's find a way to do that. Surely there's a solution here that doesn't require violence. The solution is simple, Wilson said. Surrender and obey the law. The law that breaks treaties? Dakota challenged. The law that takes our land? The law that kills our children and calls it peace? Wilson's face twisted with contempt. You're all the same. Can't accept that the world is changing. The Apache way of life is over. The sooner you accept that, the better. Rebecca saw the rage building in Dakota, saw his warriors ready to fight despite the odds. She saw Wilson's troops with their guns ready. This was about to explode into violence that would kill everyone she loved. She made a decision. Wait, she said loudly. I have a proposal. What if we go to the reservation peacefully, but I'm allowed to come as Dakota's wife, not as a prisoner, but as a member of the Apache people. I can help. I can be a translator, a teacher. I can help bridge the gap between your world and theirs. Wilson stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You want to go to the reservation? With them? Yes, if it means preventing this bloodshed, yes. But I go as Dakota's wife with the same rights as any Apache woman, and I want assurance that these people will be treated fairly, that they'll receive the supplies and land they're promised. You're insane, Wilson said. But she could see he was considering it. It would be a victory for him, getting Dakota's band onto the reservation without a fight. Having a white woman choose to go with them was unusual, but it wasn't illegal. Dakota grabbed her arm. Rebecca, no. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, she said in Apache so Wilson couldn't understand. If we fight, you'll all die. Hope will lose you. I'll lose you. This way we have a chance. Maybe not a good chance, but a chance. Reservation is death, Dakota said, his voice breaking. Slow death? Maybe, she said. Or maybe we can find a way to survive there together. The night before they left for the reservation, the Apache held the wedding ceremony that had been planned. It was a bittersweet celebration, filled with joy for the union but sorrow for what was to come. Everyone knew that life on the reservation would be hard, that they were giving up their freedom. But they also knew that Rebecca had saved them from immediate death. For that, she had earned not just their respect but their love. Nashota prepared Rebecca for the ceremony, dressing her in beautiful traditional clothing that the women had been making for weeks. The dress was soft deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork and patterns that told stories. They braided her hair in the Apache style and painted ceremonial symbols on her face with clay and plant dyes. When Rebecca emerged from Nashota's shelter, the whole camp was waiting. They had built a sacred fire in the center of the camp, and the elders sat in a circle around it. Dakota stood waiting for her, dressed in his finest clothing, looking every bit the powerful chief he was. But when he saw Rebecca, his eyes filled with such love and pride that she felt her heart might burst. The ceremony was conducted by the eldest member of the tribe, a man so old that his face was like weathered leather. He spoke in Apache, his voice strong despite his age, calling upon the Creator to bless this union. He spoke of the eagle and the wolf, two different creatures who chose to hunt together because together they were stronger. He spoke of the river and the stone, how water shapes rock over time, and rock gives the water direction. Rebecca and Dakota stood together holding hands, while the elder blessed them with sacred herbs and spoke the ancient words of binding. Then it was time for them to speak their own promises. Dakota spoke first in Apache, his voice carrying to every person gathered. I promise to protect you and our daughter with my life. I promise to honor you as my equal, my partner, my heart. You came to us broken, but you showed us what real strength looks like. You taught me that love is not weakness, but the greatest courage. I choose you today, tomorrow, and for all my days." Rebecca spoke next in the Apache language she had learned, her pronunciation careful but clear. "I promise to stand beside you in good times and hard times. I promise to honor your people as my people, your ways as my ways. You showed me mercy when I had nowhere else to turn. You taught me that family is not about blood but about choice. I choose you. I choose this life, and I will never look back." The elder pronounced them husband and wife in the eyes of the Creator and the tribe. The people cheered and drums began to beat. Despite everything they faced, despite the uncertainty of tomorrow, tonight they celebrated. They danced around the fire, they sang the old songs. They feasted on the food that had been prepared. Hope, now old enough to toddle around, was passed from person to person, each one blessing her and welcoming her as part of the tribe. She giggled and clapped her hands, completely unaware of how unusual her life was, how she existed between two worlds. Late that night, when the celebration had quieted and most people had gone to sleep, Rebecca and Dakota sat together outside their shelter, looking up at the stars. Tomorrow they would begin the journey to the reservation. Tomorrow their lives would change again. But tonight they were husband and wife, bound together by love and ceremony. "Are you afraid?" Rebecca asked softly. "Yes," Dakota admitted. "Reservation is like cage. We are eagles meant to fly. Cage will hurt. Then we'll find a way to make the cage bigger," Rebecca said. "We'll find ways to keep the old traditions alive. We'll teach the children the stories and the songs. We'll remind everyone who they are, where they came from." Dakota pulled her close. "How you always so strong? So brave." "I'm not brave," Rebecca said. "I'm terrified. But I learned something these past months. Fear doesn't have to stop you. You can be afraid and still move forward. You taught me that." The journey to the reservation took 5 days. Captain Wilson kept his word about safe passage, but the journey itself was humiliating. The Apache were made to walk in a long line, with soldiers on horseback flanking them on both sides like they were criminals being transported to prison. It reminded everyone that they were no longer free people. They were prisoners now, even if the prison was called a reservation. Rebecca walked with the women, carrying Hope on her back in the traditional way. The soldiers stared at her, some with confusion, some with disgust. A white woman choosing to walk with the Apache, dressed in their clothing, speaking their language. To them, she was a traitor to her race. But Rebecca held her head high. She had made her choice, and she wouldn't apologize for it. When they finally arrived at the reservation, Rebecca's heart sank. The land was poor, dry, and rocky with little water. The buildings that were supposed to house the Apache were little more than crude shacks. The promised supplies were nowhere to be seen. This was what the government considered adequate for human beings. Captain Wilson handed Dakota over to the Indian agent, a pudgy man named Crawford, who looked at the Apache with barely concealed contempt. Wilson also made Rebecca sign the statement he had promised, confirming that she was there voluntarily. Then he left, and they were alone with their new reality. The first weeks on the reservation were incredibly hard. The Apache were assigned plots of land and told to farm, but many of them had never farmed before. They were hunters, gatherers, nomadic people. Trying to force them into settled farming life was like trying to force fish to live on land. The government rations that were supposed to feed them were inadequate and often spoiled. Crawford, the Indian agent, was corrupt. He sold the best supplies on the black market and gave the Apache whatever was left over. People began to get sick. The children especially struggled with the change from their free-roaming life to this confined existence. But Rebecca refused to give up. She threw herself into helping however she could. She set up a small school, teaching both Apache and English. She knew that if the children could navigate both worlds, they would have better chances of survival. She taught them to read and write, but she also made sure they learned their own language and traditions from the elders. She also became an advocate for the tribe. She wrote letters to government officials, documenting the inadequate supplies and Crawford's corruption. She demanded meetings with the regional supervisor, refusing to be dismissed or ignored. Having been educated in Boston, she knew how to write formally, how to make arguments that white officials would listen to. At first, her letters were ignored, but Rebecca was persistent. She kept writing, kept documenting, kept demanding better treatment, and slowly things began to change. A new supervisor came to investigate the complaints and found that everything Rebecca had reported was true. Crawford was removed from his position and replaced with someone more honest. The supplies improved. The Apache were given better tools for farming and more support in learning how to use them. It wasn't perfect, not by a long way, but it was better than it had been. And the tribe knew that the improvements had come because of Rebecca's tireless advocacy. Years passed. Life on the reservation remained difficult, but the people adapted. They found ways to keep their traditions alive despite the restrictions. They told the stories, sang the songs, performed the ceremonies in secret when necessary. They remained Apache, even in captivity. Hope grew into a beautiful, intelligent girl who moved easily between the Apache and white worlds. She spoke both languages fluently. She knew the Apache stories and traditions as well as any child born into the tribe. But she could also read and write English better than most white children her age. She was proof that it was possible to honor both cultures, to build bridges instead of walls. Rebecca and Dakota had 2 more children, a son they named Nako and a daughter they named Kaya, after Dakota's first wife. Rebecca had suggested the name, wanting to honor the woman who had come before her. It was a gesture that touched Dakota deeply and showed the tribe that Rebecca respected their past even as she helped build their future. The small school Rebecca had started grew. She trained other teachers, both Apache and white, who believed in education as a path forward rather than a tool of forced assimilation. Her school taught children to be proud of who they were, while also giving them the skills they needed to navigate the changing world. As Rebecca approached her 30th year, she sometimes looked back on the terrified, broken girl who had arrived at that trading post so long ago. That girl had thought her life was over, that she had nothing left to live for except the baby in her belly. She had been wrong. That loss, that rejection, that journey through darkness had led her here, to a life filled with purpose and meaning, to a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible, to a family that chose her every single day, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. One evening, she sat outside their home on the reservation with Dakota, watching their children play with the other tribe children. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Dakota held her hand, his thumb gently rubbing across her knuckles in a gesture that had become as familiar as breathing. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Choosing this life? It has been hard. I know you give up much." Rebecca thought about the question seriously. Yes, life had been hard. There were days when she was exhausted from fighting for supplies,